One of my favorite things to learn about and read about is when did humans arrive in the Americas, and then how quickly did they spread and develop across the continents. And for a long time, our start point for that was considered the Clovis culture, the Clovis site in New Mexico. And that was thought to be around 10 to 13,000 years ago. And for a long time, that was when we knew that humans had arrived and established themselves in the Americas. But we're finding more and more, almost it feels like daily, that just keeps blowing that number back and revising it back. There's two sites in particular that I want to talk about, and then there's a third site that we're going to get to. But the two sites in particular, one of those is called the Napihe site, and forgive me if I said that incorrectly. But the Napihe site, also known as Cooper's Ferry, it's in Idaho, and it's on the traditional lands of the Nez Perce tribe. And they did a recent excavation here, or dig, and they found 189 stone artifacts, about 29 stone tools, all done actually in conjunction with the Nez Perce tribe, which is really, really cool. And they found a hearth, processing station for food, other sorts of pits that could have been used for a variety of reasons. And this dates to about 16,000 years ago. So about 3,000 years older than the Clovis culture. And then if you go to Virginia, there's another site called Cactus Hill on the Nottoway River. And this site, again, they found tools, pottery, hearths, all that sort of thing, dates to about 20,000 years ago, which is wild. Almost 10,000 years older than the Clovis culture. And we can argue, when you're dealing in times as big as this, it's hard to be super accurate. But the fact that we keep finding stuff that's testing older and older and older is really remarkable. And it's just pushing back our understanding of when these first peoples came to the Americas and how quickly they spread across it and established themselves. But both of these sites are pretty small. Like I said, villages, towns, not very big. So where did the first city come from? Well, we got to go to South America. We got to go to Peru. And that's the city of Caral. And that's in northern Peru on the Supe River Valley. And it was established kind of on a high plain, and then the valley was below. And the valley was very, very fertile. So humans probably arrived around 9,000 BCE to this area. Again, not much more recent than the Clovis culture. But they arrived to this area in 9,000 BCE. And by 3200 BCE, they were a very well-established community. And Caral was here, and they had these advantages. One being the valley itself was incredibly fertile. Two, they were able to grow cotton and use cotton for a variety of things. But one of the things that they used was particularly to make fishing nets or fishing bags called shikras. And again, because they're able to use agriculture to make these, tools for them that increased their food production along the river and in the ocean. They were also able to domesticate the llama, which again was a beast of burden. It's the only indigenous animal that we know of that was domesticated by the peoples that first moved here. And because they had the llama, they were able to, again, increase their agricultural ability, use it to build things, to transport, trade, all of these things that gave them an advantage kind of over their neighbors. By 2900 BCE, the city of Caral was about 165 acres, which was massive for the time. I had about 20,000 people living there. Again, very, very large for 5,000 years ago. They had a government called, and it was organized by the Caracas, which I guess means heads of lineages, so like family heads or maybe like tribal heads is what we would think of it today. And it was organized in a network of districts that kind of spread across the city and the surrounding areas. So it was a very, very advanced civilization. They had advanced trade networks with other neighboring communities. They had a sea salt trade, so they would use the sea, they would harvest sea salt from the ocean and then trade that with the inland neighbors and stuff like that. And so they were very rich, in which the salt trade was interesting because Ghana, the Kingdom of Ghana in Western Africa, and eventually its successor, the Kingdom of Mali, a lot of their wealth was based on the salt fields that they had. And so they would have salt because you could use salt to preserve food. So they would have salt and they would trade that, and that made them more money than anything else. And so it looks like the same thing with the people of Caral. But the keystone thing about the city is they had these pyramids, these 7 massive temple pyramids. The largest one is called the Templo Mayor. It was 92 feet tall, 490 feet long, and 360 feet wide. So very, very large. Again, the only animal that they had to help them was the llama, and that does not have the towing capacity of a Ford F-150. And so they built these essentially by hand, and they built them at the latest by about 2900 BCE. For comparison's sake, the pyramids in Egypt started being built around 2700 BCE. So these pyramids in Caral predate the pyramids of ancient Egypt, which is again just fascinating. Now, eventually, Caral, went into decline like all civilizations do, and this was partly due to climate change. El Nino and La Nina hit it one time, well, many times. One particular time they had a pretty devastating El Nino, which flooded out a lot of the valley. And then La Nina came the next year, and it was much colder, so it was harder to reestablish those crops and trade. And that eventually led to the decline of the city of Caral. But that is as far as we know for now. Who knows what'll happen in another year or two? We might find something else. But that is the oldest city, Caral, the oldest city in the Americas. Have a great day in history.